want you all to join these students in giving our faculty and staff a hand for all that they do. We do have some new faces around, and for those of you who are freshmen, all of us are new faces. I realize that, but for upperclassmen, I want to welcome the new faces that we have on campus. Jenny Matheny, I heard she's Dr. J. Is that what I heard? Something like that. Jenny Johnson, our Vice President for Financial and Administrative Services. 3J names Jenna Wilson in the Advancement Office. Glad she's here. Aaron Miller, part-time accountant for us, just started this week, and we welcome Aaron. And then, not on campus yet, but next Monday we'll welcome Terry Aubrey, who will be serving as our Retention and Learning Skills Coordinator. So we're so glad that she's going to be joining us as well. And another new name you may hear every now and then, Bruce Long. He's going to help with our non-traditional. He's the director of our non-traditional program. He lives in Dallas, and he'll be on campus about once a month. So if you see that face around, that's who that is. And I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to thank my wife, Lisa, for all that she does. She's also here to help out in any way that she can. For those of you who haven't been able to meet her, make sure that you reach out. She's a special lady. I wouldn't be who I am today if it weren't for the Lord and for my wife. So just want to thank you, Lisa, for all of that. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you like tests? Anybody in the room? No? Anybody? I'm kind of weird. I enjoyed tests because it meant that part of the class was coming to an end. I enjoyed finals week. I'm strange because it was like the last lap of a race where you're dying and you got that last lap and you can just go all out because you know it's going to be finished soon. That's the way finals week feels for me. I mean, when I was in school, it was like just run hard, finish it strong. You're going to have some in college, and here's my advice. I want you to check out a couple here. Don't do this on a test. Look at it. 0 out of, go back to the other one. 0 out of 10. Cheaters never win. The next time you copy the answers of your seatmate on the right number, pick the right number. All they did was transcribe. All the answers are right. They're just one letter off. Notice that. Don't ever do that. Don't cheat, by the way, either. Did you just guess the last one? A. Look at the next one. I know it's true, but Jesus isn't always the right answer. So if you don't know the answers on the test, in New Testament, you could probably put Jesus, but it depends on the test. For example, number 7, what is Reverend Hale's specialty? Jesus. Why is Mrs. Putnam interested in Tituba's conjuring? Jesus. Jesus isn't always the right answer, okay? Look at the next one. This is interesting to me. A+ for creativity, F. Let me read some of the answers. Number 2, where was the Declaration of Independence signed? On the bottom of the page. River Robbie flows in which state? Liquid state. What is the main reason for divorce? Marriage. I mean, come on. Think about it. You're creative. What is the main reason for exams? Failure. What can you never eat for breakfast? Lunch and dinner. I disagree with that. Some of y'all eat pizza for breakfast. Am I right? Yep, that works. What looks like half an apple? The other half. If you throw a red stone into the blue sea, what will it become? Simply a wet stone. I mean, there's some creativity here, but think about it a little bit. I love this one. How can you lift an elephant with one hand? And it says you can never lift an elephant that only has one hand. Think about that for a minute. Just let that one sink in for a second. I like that one for some reason. I don't know why. The bottom one, how can you drop a raw egg onto a concrete floor without cracking it? Any way you want, because a concrete floor is very hard to crack. I don't know why. Some of these, I'm sharing with you my mindset here. Look at this last one. This is a test. Look up at the upper right. A-, nice job. The professor obviously didn't read the whole essay because look at the last paragraph. In all honesty, I'm already bored with this topic. It's far less interesting than I had hoped, and I really don't want to finish this essay. I'm fairly sure you don't really read these, so I'm just going to put enough words down to make it seem like I wrote a lot while I kill time. I can't read the one word. There's some words that rhyme with time. Crime, dime, mine, chime, line. Oh, dude, you know what has lime in it? Sprite. It's like lemon lime. I could really go for one of those about right now. I'm not into Sierra Mist. That just isn't the same. It tries too hard to be Sprite, but it just can't pull it off. It should just try to be itself and stop trying to measure up to other sodas. A minus. I don't think the faculty member graded that paper, did you? So faculty, that's one for you. Make sure you grade everything. Many of you know the name Tom Bodett. Anybody know the name Tom Bodett? What's he known for? Motel 6. We'll leave the light on for you. He's a famous author. He's a voice actor. He also has a great quote that I think is appropriate for today. There's a difference between school and life. In school, you're given a lesson and then given a test. In life, you're given a test that teaches you a lesson. I think that's kind of what James had in mind when he wrote James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. I think that's what James had in mind when he started that verse, count it all joy. He knew that tests and trials teach us very important lessons. In fact, life's most defining moments are usually in painful and trying experiences. Come in trials, they come in tests. Let's read this verse. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be complete, lacking in nothing. It's a great text for the year. As I've been reading through this text and thinking about this theme over the summer, I have noticed some key words that have stood out to me. For one, it says brothers. It doesn't mean to exclude you ladies. I think it includes all of us. Notice it's plural. The truth of the matter is we're not alone when we go through life, when we go through tests, when we go through trials. We are not alone. Others have trials. Others have doubts. Others have hard days. All of us experience it. So we're not alone. And I want us to understand that moving forward. When we count it all joy, I think more often than not, depending on our personality, our trials, our tests can cause us to disconnect from other people. But we're not alone. You need to understand others have them. When. Notice the word when. It's not if, but when. Cole read the other night the passage out of Timothy. All who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. It's going to happen to all of us. It's not if, but when. Craig Rochelle said his pastor told him throughout his life, you're either coming out of a tough season, in the middle of a tough season, or headed into a tough season. From my experience in life, I've found that to be true. Peter even says this in 1 Peter 4. Dear friends, do not be surprised at the painful trial you are suffering, as though something strange were happening to you. Isn't that interesting? I think more often than not, when we go through hard times, we do think it's something strange, it's something unusual, it's something rare. But Peter says, don't be surprised at the painful trial you're suffering, as though something strange were happening to you. Because they happen to all of us. Then he uses the word various, a variety of all sizes, shapes, coming at us from a variety of angles. If you were able to be here the other night, you heard some of our StuGov officers share what they've been fighting with in the last few years. Brooklyn shared about losing her roommate Sally in a car wreck her freshman year. That was not just a challenge for Brooklyn, it was a challenge for the whole basketball team, for the whole campus. It's a hard day, I can remember it vividly. Mary Frances shared about pouring her identity into being the best and couldn't let a tough season threaten her identity and therefore steal her joy. Cole shared about tough times at Kanakuk and what he learned from serving at camp there. You know, if we had the time, and we do this year, by the way, but if we had the time today, we could go around the room and hear some of the tough times we've all endured. Some of the tests we've all been through. Some of the struggles we've all had. Some of you have single parents. You've been through parents with job losses, illnesses, friends betraying us, financial difficulties, family problems. If you're one who lives your faith, you've probably had another friend who didn't want anything to do with you because of your faith. Even somewhere in high school, probably somebody who gave you a hard time because of your faith and really harassed you for that. We all go through them. MCC has even had some of the trials of their own. Our second president, President Johnson, he took over in the second year of the school back in 1928. In that age range, he died while in office many years later. The next two presidents who replaced him, one of them had health issues and didn't last long. Those two guys only lasted a year and a half. The other one had an affair and because of moral issues got removed from office. The colleges had tough times. Income drops due to giving. Income declines due to enrollment being down. Foreclosure. My senior year, I told the freshmen this yesterday, my senior year, President Cable held up a fake news headline that said MCC closes its doors. I've done all that time, taken all these classes, worked so hard, ran hard that last lap during finals week, and I was wondering, is the school going to be open by the time my senior year is open? A few years ago, maybe a couple of decades ago, we had the death of 3 camp team members. They were in a serious accident in New Mexico, and 3 of the 4 passed away. Only 1 survived. You see, trials and tests come at all of us, regardless of our age and stage in life. We can respond in a number of ways. I think often we discount them. We kind of discount them and don't learn from them. We complain, we lash out at others, we blame others, we bail out, we quit, we just simply fold. We discount them. We can fear them and be paralyzed by that fear, make very little progress into the future. We can just be stuck right where we are. We can often do like the Israelites and look in the rearview mirror and just lament at what we used to have and where we used to be. I just want to go back to Egypt. Would that we would still be in slavery in Egypt. We just look in that rearview mirror. We play what-if games about what could be right now if this didn't happen. We don't take the test head on. But James gives us a hard challenge. He says to count it all joy. Count it all joy when you encounter various trials, when you encounter difficult times, and when you encounter challenges and hurdles that keep you from going where you're going. He tells us to count it all joy. And throughout this year, we're going to be looking at this theme, and like the other words that have stuck out to me, right now I want to look at one word that I want to focus on to take it a little bit further, and that one word is the first word in the verse, count. Some translations use consider. Some use deem it all joy. Regardless, we get the meaning. What's he telling us? I think he's given us some clues of what we need to count so that we can count it all joy and learn what we can learn. First thing we need to count, first thing we need to consider is the value of trials that we go through and how we benefit from them. Now, I know that may seem hard for some of us to understand. It may be hard, especially you might be in the middle of the biggest test, the biggest trial, the biggest stress you've ever been in front of. And it is hard sometimes to look at a hurdle that's larger than you've ever jumped before and to think, how can I count this all joy? How can I take on this challenge? How can I jump this hurdle? But I think when we understand that the trials that we face, when we go through them with faith, we can benefit from them. We can grow from them. In fact, the verse says it so clearly. I love what he says. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be complete, lacking in nothing. When we go through a trial and we face it with faith and we work over those hurdles that we think are too large, we have to understand it produces steadfastness. It produces endurance. It produces perseverance that helps us go through life and other challenges that are going to be facing us in the future. You see, I firmly believe this. Trials are not unfruitful unless we consider that they are. Chew on that for a minute. Our trials we face are not unfruitful unless we consider that they are and just kind of shut down and give up on it. When we consider that they are and God's not going to help us through it, when we think that we're alone and we're fighting this by ourselves, we're not going to take it on. But when we do take it on in faith, when we do look to God, when we do rely on others, those times can be fruitful, and our faith can produce steadfastness, endurance, perseverance to grow us into be the people that God wants us to be. You know, I've had those trials. There was a time in Great Bend when I was a pastor of the church there. We were worried about finances one day. When I moved there, they had a surplus in the bank. The church had just been in a hard time for a couple of years. They had a surplus in the bank, and within 4 months, that surplus was gone. And the church board told me in the meeting the night before, hey, payday's on Friday. We don't know how you're going to pay. Our son was 1 year old. Our daughter was 3 years old. I had left the church that took care of us so well for 3 years, and I was like, what in the world, God? Why did you bring me here? What in the world did we leave Oakley for? My rearview mirror got big. I kept thinking, man, that I would have stayed in Oakley where farmers gave us free beef and free pork and people took care of us. But I was sitting there praying in the church that day and just poured out my heart to God and really kind of complaining. And I didn't hear God's voice, but I felt him share in my spirit. Kevin, I didn't bring you here for this. I did bring you here, and I brought you here to do what you can do. And you need to do what you can do and let me do what only I can do. And that day I walked out of there with a peace in my heart. Why? Because I knew I wasn't alone. I knew that this was testing my faith like it had never been tested before. I didn't have a senior pastor to fight those fights for me as a youth pastor. I was now the only guy on staff. And I had to rely on God to work that through with me. You see, we need to be challenged to not view trials as intruders, but to view them as opportunities for God to produce His work in us, to help us be the people that He wants us to be. I think James also wanted us to consider what trials and tests reveal about us. Because when we're going through them, and what we feel and what we begin to respond with actually gives us a view of what we value personally. You see, if what we hold close to our hearts is revealed, where our identity lies. Mary Frances used a phrase Sunday night that I loved. She shared this. She said she really had to learn that it is a lie that other people running in her lane reduces her identity. Why? Because our identity is not wrapped up in what we do. Our identity is not wrapped up in our talents and our abilities. Our identity and who we are is wrapped up in one person, Jesus Christ. That's where we need to get our strength from. That's where we need to get our identity from. If we have a strength and a talent and ability, we have it because He gave it to us. Not because we earned it or we deserve it or we've done something. And if that's the case, when the trial hits me, I need to rely on that. But you see, the problem is if we value earthly things, earthly success, earthly security, our talents and abilities, then when trials come and take that away from us, we don't consider them all joy. And what do? We begin to discount, we need to complain, we need to quit, we need to look in the rearview mirror. You see, these trials reveal something out of us that we need to learn. You see, if we value God and our relationship with Him of utmost importance, then our trials do something great. They push us toward Him, where we can grow our faith. And then when our faith grows, it produces perseverance, all of the above. I think He's also challenging us to consider the bigger picture of what's going on in our lives. And I know at 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, your bigger picture of what's going on in your life may be much more limited. But at 57 years old, I begin, I think, to appreciate a little bit more every year the bigger picture of what's going on in life. And there's so much bigger going on, and we need to understand it. I recently attended the Global Leadership Summit. Simon Sinek did a great talk, and I loved it. He talked about operating from a finite perspective and the need to operate from an infinite perspective. Hey, you need about 40 minutes worth, but if I were to sum it up, he would say, if we think finitely, we only think short term. We focus on winning at all costs. We focus on being number one. We think about ourselves before we think about others. Many people in our world think finitely. But he goes, we need to think infinitely. And when we think from an infinite perspective, we think about those around us. We think about the generation after us. We think about the bigger mission that needs to be a part of who we may be serving. And we don't just think about the personal win. And while I love what he shared, he didn't go far enough. He had the perfect chance then, if he'd have been a preacher, that's the way I was thinking, to challenge us to think even larger from an eternal perspective. And I want to challenge you to think larger than just finitely or infinitely. I want to challenge you to start thinking eternally. And I believe that's what James is doing. That's what James is encouraging us to consider. Look at the bigger picture of what's going on in our life and think from an eternal perspective. Because in James chapter 1, verse 12, he says this, "Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him." You see, that's what he's saying. If we handle these trials well, if they grow our faith and they grow our perseverance, if we count it all joy and face them down with faith instead of running away in fear, God's going to do his work in us, and one day we'll receive that incredible gift, that incredible joy, that joy that's going to last for all eternity. We have eternity to consider, and that's what God is always working us toward. I also think he's challenging us to consider how big God is. You ever really thought about it? Do you believe God is in control? Do you believe God is good? Do you believe that in the midst of darkness, God is working so the darkness becomes light? Sam Chand, in his book, Leadership Pain, quotes from the book Finding God by Larry Crabb. And Larry Crabb said this: many of us think of God as an especially attentive waiter. He's going to give us what we want, make sure we have it all the time. But Sam responds to that thought and writes this: when we get good service from him, we give him a nice tip of praise. When we don't get what we want, we complain. Or do we trust that the sovereign Lord of the universe just might know more than we do about how the world should work? He continues, have we experienced enough of his grace and greatness to convince us to have ambidextrous faith? Trusting that he will use both blessings and heartaches to produce wisdom, faith, character, and hope in us? Thanking God for his love, his power, and his wisdom, no matter how or where he leads us? That he renews our hope, lightens our load, and puts steel in our soul. I love that phrase, ambidextrous faith. Guys in the room who played baseball, gals in the room who played softball. Don't you love that switch hitter who go to the other side of the plate and hit left-handed, not just right-handed? That person who's got the ability, depending on the pitcher and what their strength is, to go to either side of the plate and hit from the right side or hit from the left side. I've always been in awe of people who can do ambidextrous hitting, either right-handed or left-handed, and it doesn't matter. I've always been in awe of the basketball player who can go up with a right hand for a layup or a left hand for a layup, and you can't tell when they're going up whether they're right-handed or left-handed. Y'all know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? Oh, that our faith would be that way. That it didn't matter if we were facing blessing or we were facing trial. That it didn't matter if God was just pouring out on us abundantly or we were facing the most difficult challenge we've ever faced. But that our faith would know and trust that God is big enough to handle it, whether he's blessing us or we're facing a test. And that God is in control and working through all of it. Oh, that we would have an ambidextrous faith. And, I think that's exactly why God's going to work through this theme this year. So that we can all grow that way this year. And I believe that's just the beginning of what James wants us to consider. As we move forward this year to count it all joy. This theme's going to be awesome. But bottom line, we need to consider Jesus as we go through it all. Bottom line, we need to consider Jesus. And the writer of Hebrews said this in Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you may not grow weary and lose heart. We're going to count it all joy. I believe we need to consider Jesus. Do we face opposition? Yeah, we do. The civil and religious authorities oppose Jesus at every turn. Do we encounter evil in all its forms? Satan himself tempted Jesus. Do we feel betrayed and abandoned? The crowd that yelled Hosanna soon cried, crucify him. And almost all of his best friends ran for their lives at his greatest hour of need, at his crucifixion. Do we feel misunderstood? The Lord of glory stepped out of heaven to rescue sinful people, and those same sinful people killed him. Do we feel vulnerable? He was stripped, beaten, and hung on a cross in public humiliation. Why did he do all of this? Out of love for the very ones who had run away from him as he hung on the cross, who had driven spikes into his hands and his feet, and who jeered him as he hung on the cross. People just like you and me. You see, when we think about quitting, we can think about Jesus. In the greatest act of love ever known, when he was unjustly dying for those who despised him, he could have come down from the cross and killed them all. But he stayed. He endured it all. Why? For every one of us. For every one of us. Dion talked the other night and used the two words, even though. Oh, that we would, even though, have a faith that still hangs on. Even though we're facing trials and hard times, when we hang on. Even though people may despise us. Even though people may ridicule us. Even though we may be facing a challenge, would our faith stay strong. I love the prophet Habakkuk when he said this. Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines. Though the olive crop fails and the food fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. The challenge for the year is to count all joy. And are you going to face tests and trials that are going to make you challenge you whether you're going to count it all joy? Yes, you are. Are our faculty and staff going to face trials that's going to test them in that? Yes, they are. Are my wife and I going to face trials that are going to make us wonder that? Yes, they are. But as we start this journey this year, let's remember that we're going to try to persevere and endure and grow our faith so that we can become the people that God intends for us to become. And it starts by counting it all joy when we encounter it, because it gives us an opportunity to trust in God like never before. Father, I pray. I want to pray for this whole year. I want to pray for every aspect of it that's going to happen in the classroom, in the hallways,